Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Lorn Allison again with the masterofthebody.com podcast. And I am going to do today's podcast on breathing and its importance in meditation or some type of reflective practice. I think that a lot of people and patients of mine don't even know that I am a long-time meditator for several decades, close to 30 years at this point. And I think there's a lot of mystery around meditation in general, even though there are apps for it and there's tons of classes for it and all kinds of techniques and visualizations and so forth. But it doesn't even need to be that complicated. Now, visualization can be very helpful, but probably the most important thing would be control of the breathing. Now, it's an ancient idea to use breathing. Apologize, that's my cell phone going off. It's an ancient idea to use breathing to get the mind in the state where it is receptive to meditation. And there's good reason for that. And that reasoning is because, as we now know from a scientific standpoint, and of course, there's been a lot of research going on for a long time, but as of late, we know that the breathing influences the mind in a way that controls dominant brainwave patterns. Now, I have heard teachers say that brainwave control is not meditation. I would probably be inclined to agree with that. But that gets into another subject. And so we want to stick with what the breathing does and why it would be so beneficial to use for the average person, because it kind of demystifies the entire process of meditating and makes it what it really is, which is pretty simplistic. And really, meditation is a state. You can use many different techniques to get there, but the breathing is probably the most simplistic and universal way to do it without what would be perceived as dogma of mantras and other types of visual techniques that are taught around the world for different cultures, because it's easier for different cultures to absorb different techniques and use them based on their cultural belief patterns. So the breathing, from the simplest standpoint, being taught for meditation is just to watch your breathing or to be aware of it. And that can be very useful. Sometimes you need something that's a little more aggressive to kind of snap the mind into a state where it's a little more controlled. I find that when you talk to people and you find, oh, I'm watching my breathing, but 1 minute they're trying to pay attention to the breathing, and the next minute they are off paying their bills in their mind. And so they get distracted very easily because their physiology isn't well under control. Now, historically, let's say if we use yoga or the Indian form of teaching people a discipline to get better at meditation, then you find that the postures and different techniques that they were using were primarily just to calm the body down so that the mind would be able to calm down and the person could reach a meditative state. There are obviously a lot of different beliefs in different cultures about the best ways to do these things, but the end goal is really non-dogmatic, and it is not dependent on any particular set of practices. It really can be achieved in a multitude of ways. The breathing, if you go through any culture or any system, belief system, that is the one that is consistent through all systems because it works, and it works very well. With the Indian system, breathing or the pranayama was only one of the 8 limbs of yoga as a discipline, but it is definitely one of the most powerful. Now, aside from watching the breathing as an awareness technique to try to get to a meditative state, you can actually start to control the breath cycle, which would mean controlling rhythms, whether that's breathing for a certain amount of seconds and holding it in, and then exhaling for a certain amount of seconds and then holding it out for a certain amount of seconds, which those techniques are proven in research to change the dominant brainwave pattern, which I referred to earlier. Now, states such as beta, alpha, theta, delta, most people have heard of sleep states, REM sleep or deep sleep, which would be associated with the delta brainwave pattern, which is anywhere from 0 to 2 to 4 cycles per second. And what that means is basically wavelengths. And so the longer the wavelength, the deeper the state, or the less in real time, I guess the person feels. So in other words, in most people, once they're adults, they're not in the delta state unless they're sleeping. Now, you can actually access those states with breathing control. And breathing techniques that can do that, we have on the website, masterthebody.com. And these techniques are very effective. We know now from research that doing breathing techniques, almost any kind of technique, lends you the capacity to control some of your autonomic functions of the nervous system, meaning they're automatic, such as breathing rate, heart rate, blood pressure, and some of the other things that come in line with that is a change of the dominant brainwave pattern. So that means, let's say a person says, I want to meditate, but I can never get my mind, I'm always fidgeting, my mind's not under control, I just can't sit there, it drives me crazy. Well, the breathing techniques can calm the person down so that they can sit there without feeling that anxiousness or that fidgeting, so that it gives them a chance to actually relax. Now, there's been books written about this, what you're tapping into with the breathing in the nervous system that allows the person to relax so that they can attempt to meditate. Now, meditating and sitting down to meditate and being quiet and having your eyes closed, that doesn't necessarily mean you're meditating. And so when you do the breathing and you start to see that you can actually sit calmly, and if you wanted to visualize something, you could certainly do that, but still, visualization techniques are only used to get the mind under control, essentially. So it's arguable that meditation itself is the absence of any thought whatsoever, albeit that that's going to be a very short period of time. But in reality, it's believed that a person cannot meditate for more than a microsecond at any time, even experienced meditators. So that is another subject. But what we do know is that if you are attempting to meditate, because let's say you've read about it in all the myriad of outlets, media outlets or magazines or teaching universities and hospitals that say, hey, we've done all this research and this is actually excellent for health in general and state of mind. The breathing techniques are the fastest, most reliable, consistent way to control your physiology to the point where you can relax the mind and get to a state that would be considered a meditative state. Now, does that mean that because you have changed your breathing pattern and now your dominant brainwave state is delta or theta or even alpha, which is a very common brainwave pattern that is the target of a lot of devices that are out there to bring people into or bring their brainwaves into compliance with the way the device is helping them get there. But alpha or any particular brainwave state wouldn't necessarily be considered meditating, but it certainly puts you in the state that makes you receptive for it. So the breathing techniques like we have listed on masterthebody.com are, at least initially, something that allows you to change your dominant brainwave pattern, which makes you much more in a susceptible state to being able to meditate. There's a lot of other benefits to the breathing, which we enumerate as well, but I have gotten a lot of questions about this from my experience and having been a long-time meditator as to how effective the breathing is. And I can tell you, not only from my personal experience, but from all of the masters, so to speak, that I have learned from over the years, who, in terms of self-regulation and autonomic control states and breathing states and the ability to have dominion over the breathing cycle, that the breathing is the most significant thing that we can control, not only for general better health and meditative state, but for overall happiness and strength. So as a general rule, I want to get back to just being aware of the breathing cycle is very helpful. But I think in today's society, because of all of the demands, things that we need to be aware of and our bills and so forth, and all the things that are needing to be remembered at any given time on any given day, that being a little more aggressive with the breathing, or I should say actively aware of the breathing, meaning at times you may need to shake something off or you're having problems concentrating where you breathe a little faster just for a few seconds, or you take control of the cycle so that you can quickly grab a hold of your physiology, realizing that you are in control of it, not just being observant of your breathing. Because if you are just being observant of it, then you're not actually really affecting your state. You would over in a very, very extended period of time. But when it comes to, rushing out of work to get home, to take the kids somewhere, or whatever the demands on you are, sometimes you need to actually grab the breathing cycle, such as something like a well, there, I inhale, I exhale, I'm doing it fairly quickly as it feels to me that I need to do it. And then in the very end, I breathe it in and hold it for a few seconds. So I'm taking control of the breathing cycle, not just paying attention to it and being kind of passively involved in my state. But I'm saying I need to upregulate my system. I need to grab a hold of my physiology and move it. If I've got to grab a bunch of stuff and run out the door, then the first thing in the morning is not a cup of coffee to allow me to do that. The first thing is to grab the breathing cycle and to breathe it in, such as like and then I hold it in at the very end. It's not any specific technique. What I'm doing is sensing where my physiology is at the time, kind of grabbing it, not jerking it around, but going with it, feeding into it a little bit and grabbing the state. So there's no specific rhythm because I'm not coming from a specific rhythm. I'm coming from a somewhat of an imbalanced state. So I need to grab the breathing and not whiplash it, but direct it so that I can become one with where my state is, raise my energy up a little bit, get focused on what it is that needs to be done next, and then execute it. Breathing exercises in general are very helpful, but then you have to get to the point where you're owning the breathing cycle all day long and using it as a tool for, if you have a higher level of physical exertion, then you've got to grab a hold of the breathing cycle and become intent on using it as a tool or a pump to help you. And so the same thing goes with the meditation or relaxation principles, where you either slow down the breathing pattern or you speed it up, or you do holds, you hold it in, you hold it out, depending on what you're trying to do with your physiology to match the demands of the situation, or a situation you're trying to put yourself in proactively, meaning if I want to sit down and meditate and I need to calm down, then one of the fastest ways for me to do that is to grab my breathing cycle and move it in the direction to change my state. Now, a lot of this will come over time as you practice it and you begin to see that you are taking control over your physiology versus reacting to what's going on around you. And then you get into a whole another realm of existence in the world and what you can do to move forward and to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. If you have suggestions for a future podcast about this, I welcome that. You can send us a note through masterthebody.com. You can subscribe to the newsletter. We do provide consulting services that I have for the last 15 years, and we also can do both Skype and phone consults if you are not in our area. So thanks for listening and take care.